Good evening and welcome. This evening we're having a meeting of the Committee of the Whole, so there's no decision making in this discussion. It's mainly by consensus. Hence the informal approach to the entire process. And we have a guest with us this evening from PR2, formerly known as Bar Rider.
That's it.
Right on. And you've introduced yourself, and so thank you and welcome. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair.
Modifications to the agenda.
Do you want to do a mod? Okay, sorry. Why don't we want to go right back to modifications to the agenda? Is there a modification to the agenda, Your Worship?
Yeah, I want to add an in-camera session, an in-camera item in relation to intermunicipal negotiations. Just a quick update.
Okay, so then we'll add that as an in-camera. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so hearing no objections to the modification of the agenda, we don't need to adopt the agenda, as I understand it. So we'll move forward then. Mr. Hiltz.
Well, thank you, committee members, members of council, my worship. Today we have what we kind of wanted to do with the APCOT Phase 2 prior to the June 26th meeting and any potential decisions on the APCOT Phase 2 is to bring in BR2 architects to talk about construction schedule, to be able to frame that conversation. So council has a comfort level to kind of have an understanding about how that's going to roll out over the next if the project is approved over the next 22 months there. So I have Steve Bushnell from BR2 Architects. Usually Jim Carey is here. He's out of the province right now. So his partner in crime is here to discuss a presentation.
That really hurts.
That sounded
and an expression, but
yeah, you know, it's like when you know.
that was in jest.
So anyway, I would like to just turn over the floor to Steve to go through his presentation, and then we'll open the floor to any questions. Thank you.
Do you mind, Chair, if I ask a quick question? Sorry.
Just trying to get this thing to reload for some reason. Okay, go ahead, please, Sam.
Sorry, you indicated there were issues with Facebook Live. Are we up?
no, we're not, but we'll be up momentarily.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Well, thank you. As Carrie mentioned, I'm here to update, give you an update on the project and discuss the next steps to construction. So as of today, our team of our firm and our teams of engineers have completed tender-ready documents. Landscape plans are not complete, and we will retain a landscape architect to work with the town, obviously, the specific details of landscaping. Obviously, there's a little bit of we do have some time. Landscaping is not a huge scope. It's fairly simple to get that up to speed quickly. So we're not too worried about that. Based on the documents that have been prepared, we issued documents to two independent construction cost estimates, and they both came back with budgets under the 29.5 within pennies, and so we're pretty confident about the actual scope of the project and the budget as we move forward. I'm not sure how do we want to just throw questions? It's informal, so if there's questions at any time, please feel free.
Yeah, no, why don't we just go through it and then we'll get the questions.
Okay. So as far as the process that we've been through, we're at a point where there's really two distinct methods of construction delivery: stipulated price contract, where one would issue a complete set of documents for a public tender, and the interpretation would then, you would come back after probably a month of tendering, and there would be a price. You would accept the lowest or not, depending upon the requirements of the contract. But essentially, that's the stipulated price contract. The second one, the construction management option, we prefer a version where there's two types of construction management. There's construction management where a construction manager works for a fee through the construction process, and that fee is fixed, but the construction value is not until the final tendering. They might not, if they think there's an advantage, they might not, for instance, tender drywall until later on in the project. So it's not, it runs with a budget until that tender's closed. The alternate version is what we call, well, which is an RAC document 5B, which has a supplement at the back of the contract that at tendering, the owner has the opportunity to roll it into a fixed price at that point in time. So our recommendation right now in today's world is the construction management approach with the rider of the 5B that rolls it into a stipulated price contract. And I think the construction manager, along with tendering the work, preparing a construction schedule, and a fixed price. I mean, the advantage that we see is that we would have the construction manager on board with us early so that we can actually talk about constructability issues. If there's a flag that goes up on some constructivity issues, on some budget issues, we're actually working with them to make sure that the price is finalized. If there are, you know, there are a number of different types of issues in today's world. Drywall is one, steel is another, and any number of other things. And how do we benefit that? We benefit that by getting the construction manager on board with us and working together to deliver the product on time and on budget. I think that we could go to the next slide. I'm supposed to. So essentially, we would issue an RFP to solicit proposals from construction managers that would talk about experience, that would talk about their ability to deliver on time, schedule, safety, and then they would submit a fee for pre-construction work, and then there would be a fee for construction. Now, when we roll it into a stipulated price contract, all of that's wrapped in. The only separate price is the initial fee. We're doing one right now. It doesn't have a value of this, but I mean, I've seen the fee for pre-construction work go from $0 as an advantage to that contractor. I mean, we're doing one right now, and they threw $2,000 at it. And I've seen it for a project of this scale, anywhere up to about $30,000. So, in a competitive market, because we're putting it out for a public tender for construction managers, the market is still very competitive, so it could be any range, but ultimately the end goal is that there is no increase. The total project value is that $29,500 for construction. And it all gets wrapped into one. There's no additional fees or anything like that. So we want to get it to that fixed price, and that's what we want to do, and we want a little bit more cost certainty getting there. And that's one of the reasons why we have recommended that price. So through the tendering process, we're working with the construction manager. We get a fixed price. They'll do a budget first. They'll start tendering the components. We'll get a fixed price. The town has the ability to, it's an open book process. You know, they're paid to do the pre-tender process only, and that's what they do, open book. We can see all of the different phases of work, and you know, we can ask in this process for the local component. We can ask for, you know, how we will have a conversation about local sub-trades and their participation in the process. I mean, I don't think anybody's giving the local guys the work, but they're part of the process, and we need to make sure that they have the ability to be involved. And ultimately, with the three prices, and it's evaluated, and there's no decision made until you in fact make the decision as to, or approve whatever the recommendation is, and all of that will be laid out for you. We're not accepting sub-trades that may have completed second-rate work. Through our experience, through anybody else's, it won't necessarily be the lowest common denominator, but we still need to work within that budget. So what are the options? It just gives us a lot of flexibility to make sure you're getting the best product on time. So outside of that, you will have a fixed price. The contractor is well aware of the intricacies of the project. He has the ability to advise us if there's anything that needs to be adjusted. Any additions or changes to scope of work will be cost in addition. What we can do in our documents is identify unit prices for key specific scopes of work, whether it's asphalt, concrete, demolition, or whatever. So it's identified. We try and list that up front so everybody knows where we're going if there's an issue. And then the construction manager is responsible for all sub-trades and the suppliers. There's no contract between the town. Our contract, your contract, is a construction management contract, 5B, with the construction manager. I'll wave a pen, maybe that's a little yeah. So from a scheduling perspective, so what we've laid out is we're not waiting for drawings. So the drawing period comes out of it. We've got an expression of interest for construction managers. It's a fairly straightforward process. They're not tendering anything. We're asking them for experience, health, quality control, all of those key components, and 2 fees. For a $29.5 million project, construction management, these are the 2 fees. And we build in, we've done this several times in the last few years, so that RFP is being refined. We're now defining things like general conditions. So a lot of times general conditions can be fairly broad, and there's really only 3 places where, and generally where fees or money can be made. 1 is in the fee, 2 is in general conditions for rentals and things like that, and blown tires and allowance for coffee and stuff like that, and the other one is in self-performed work. If they're doing self-performed work, they're competing against the market, so they're either competitive or they're not. So if we can manage, the one thing we can manage is the general conditions, and we've had a conversation with the industry in the last couple of years to try and get it to apples, so there's no games, so that you don't get the 1% fee because all the money's loaded in general conditions. We're defining general conditions, we've got the fee, and we're getting a lot better range of numbers. So we're trying to work through all of those things. We can shortlist to 5 construction managers. 5 is a pretty reasonable number in the industry today. We typically, the last few projects, it's ranged from 8 to 14 contractors that submit for these types of projects. It actually is quite a preferred process in the market, in the industry. A lot of contractors find the stipulated price contract. It's a big dive to the bottom with sub-trades and everything. So the construction management process is, you're still evaluating, but you can evaluate the contractors as well as, and we get to do that. So short list of 5. From an expression of interest, and then the RFP. We can combine it as well. We've combined it in the past where we combine an expression of interest with an RFP. It's just an extra step. We can, then there's interviews if it gets close or we need some more questions answered, we have interviewed. construction managers. And one of the keys with any of these things is the personnel. So we make it very clear that we want to understand the experience of the superintendent, which is a key one for us. A lot of things can go south if you've got a lousy superintendent on the job. Project manager, what's their experience? How have they worked in the community? Have they worked on this type of project before? So we really dial down into that level of experience. And we're able to do that through the construction management process, and less so through the stipulated price contract, because you're really looking for the number rather than evaluating the number rather than the firm itself. So we're trying to evaluate the firm first and then get to the number and make sure we've got the quality and the personnel that we think can deliver this project. Obviously, we then award. We do a bunch of pre-construction activities. We sit down with the construction manager. We go through the projects and have a clear understanding of where we're headed, schedule, timing. We then talk about phasing, building around an occupied building, and all of those intricate things, and how we're making the connectivity, and do they see any red flags? How do we solve the red flags? Is there any pressure on the budget? Still working within the parameters of that time frame and the budget. So we review the pre-construction services, which is the tender. So basically, it's an open book process. Hopefully, we get 3+ sub-trades for each division, key division in a project, and it's just a plain evaluation. We have a conversation with the construction manager about their experience with those individuals, as, you know, have they delivered, you know, and where the numbers are. If the numbers are close, then we can actually ask for recommendation. Maybe there's somebody at the table that is aware of if it's a local guy, how have they performed? If they performed really well, then we make those decisions collectively. And then obviously construction, that one's 20 months. 1 week for closeout. It's all in there, and then a post-construction process. Obviously, we have our 1-year warranty inspection at sort of the 11.5-month or 11-month period. It's that process to from the expression of interest to this, I guess, the sod turning, if you want to call it that, is about 12 weeks. So 3 months or so.
Nice.
Sure.
A couple of quick questions there. Can we go back a slide, please?
Sure.
So these are consecutive times. These things are not running concurrently, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, no, they're one after the other, yes.
So from step 1 through to the end of step 7, we are roughly 22 months.
Yeah.
And at step 8, will the facility actually be open?
No, step 8 is you've been open for 11 3/4 months already.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. We go back a year later, or just under a year after substantial completion. The substantial completion is the trigger where you've got 45 days for lien or anything that may be outstanding, and after that, it's all over with. But the contractor, the warranty period starts at substantial completion, which is normally about a month or so before, you know, final completion. And substantial completion means that the project's 98% complete, or the owner is using it. So we can get to that point a little earlier if the contractor is just, you know, fixing some nicks and knocks in a corridor or whatever, and there's not, the sub-trades are gone, everybody's gone, but there's a superintendent, the drywall's he's got to come and fix a ceiling tile. So, I mean, you can be in there, you can start moving furniture in there, you can do other things, it's just when it's turned over to you. So we're pretty specific about when that happens and when the sign-off for that is happening relative to quality control and how much money you've paid the general contractor.
So the facility would be open to the public a week or 2 into step 8, is that?
Yeah.
A week or 3?
At step 7.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
A question, if I could, to Mr. Hiltz, having been through the CCBCC process, what's your comfort level with this idea?
Well, this is, this, as Mr. Bushnell has indicated, this is actually one of my preferred method as well. I've used this method in my previous role in another community. What happened in the CCBCC, that was basically the stipulated bid build process, and they were not able to manage that process, and it was, as we know, it got away from us in terms of that process. This, I think it's much more controllable in terms of that construction manager that you're working with and the relationship that you have with the architect.
Okay, so in defining or picking, construction manager, is there a matrix, a sheet with scores?
Evaluation criteria?
Yeah, but is it a point scored process? So automatically it speaks to, that sheet and who gets to the finish line. Because, if the number one issue is how many employees do you have, PCL steps up, you get 20 points for that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think what we do is every project's a little different with the evaluation criteria as far as priorities. And we can, it's typically out of 100 points. I was just editing one for today. We're doing this exact same process for a Christian school in Edmonton. And it's with getting the expression of interest out of the way, and some of the other slides we'll move through fairly quickly, but they actually talk about some of the things we ask for. Then as we can be more detailed if there are some priorities, as what's your experience working in this community? What's your experience with working with local labor? I mean, we can tailor those types of things based on priorities. And then there's, the normal, who's the superintendent, who's the project manager, who's the project coordinator, what's your QA/QC, what's your record relative to this type of project, this type of renovation for schedule and budget. We want to see before and after numbers, how many change orders. So we really tailor it. A lot of these things, they're common themes, right? We want to know whether they've been late on projects. We want to know whether every one of their projects is over budget. We want to know all of these specific things. But there are some other things that we normally apply a few smaller points to. And obviously capacity is one. And your comment about PCL is valid. They come in and they show a capacity of $400 billion.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I got one the other day from Graham. No, Bird, and it was $400 billion. I mean, okay, so it's a $12 million project. So they get some capacity, and so it's all part of the evaluation.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm getting at is it basically lends itself to a certain group.
Right.
Just the capacity alone.
You want to have a project, in my opinion, you want to be able to pick a project. If you're asking somebody for their experience and one firm has never done a project over $2 million, then I think...
No, that's fair.
It's part of the evaluation. We don't always, in fact, we do get larger firms on some of these projects, but normally, they're bringing, when you ask for experience, they're bringing projects that are done in a lot of time in Eastern Canada.
Right.
And then the local staff actually haven't done those projects. So all of a sudden, they may have the capacity, but they don't get the points for the connectivity to the experience and so forth. So it really does even out in many aspects of the evaluation.
Mr. Hiltz.
So for example, Chair, is that when we were hiring the architect for this project, one of the top criteria that we used was that we wanted to hire a firm that was involved in designing and constructing a minimum of 5 recreation facilities that included a rink and a field house in northern Alberta and Saskatchewan, because of just the different types of building conditions that they have to go through. So that was, you can tailor make it to be able to meet your specific needs of your community.
No, I'm with you.
Wait, I got some points having, in my other day job, long history in the construction history. Construction management, I'm kind of a fan of it for a couple of reasons at a municipal level. One is we can pull the trigger on the construction management card, get the pre-construction activities done, and then they go out and they can get all the bids, and that'll give us another chance to take another quick look at it before you execute construction. So if we say it's 29.5 and our proposed construction manager comes back with 50,
Yeah.
then you can kill the project right there and go back to the drawing board. You're not into a fixed price stipulated contract where, as the architect said, it's a race to the bottom. It does give us a chance to evaluate the quality and the depth of the subtrades, and I think that's a big thing. We don't want to get into the CCVCC again. We don't need this race to the bottom. It's got to go well. I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see us go with the construction management with the option to turn it into a stipulated price contract. Because the other thing I'm seeing in the industry right now too, because the market is so tight with stipulated price and bid spec build, is every little hole, every little misprint on the drawing, somebody puts an RFI out, then they request a change order, and it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yep.
Right.
This process should take care of that. I mean, at the end of the day, all we want at the end of the day is if we're making changes, it's owner-driven design changes. And those are a little more better, not because the electrical engineer forgot to put a plug on a wall that you need by code.
Right.
And so I'm fine with that too. The other thing I'd like to see in this project, I'd like to see bonding.
Well, that's part of it. So
Definitely.
one of the criteria is
For the
we
general
require
and the major subtrades.
We require a surety. I mean, part of the thing we can ask for is a letter. All we ask for is a letter saying that they can be bonded. There is a cost associated with bonding, and then obviously it's a decision that gets made.
Right, and to that, I would like to see a separate line item for the bond.
Yeah, and we do.
Because, you know, if you've got,
Yeah, you can't get bond. Sorry, I mean.
no, but if you're bringing in guys that, A, could be called on a bond, then we've already got the wrong people.
Yeah.
And B, none of these groups, at least I think the group you're going to be bringing in, has never been called on a bond.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not.
Probably
and then,
not.
And then if you look at the dollars involved with a bond,
Yeah.
it's paying for a lot of BMWs in Toronto, right?
So, but it gives you the option if you feel like, it gives some of the up-and-coming contractors that are medium-sized going big, per se, that perhaps this is their big shot at it. And so your electrician gets bonded, whereas your general may not, because this is his first whack at a $3 million project. But yeah, if you can't get a bond, you can't play with us. I think that's fair.
It's important. It's very important.
But again, you know, when you're talking dollars and you have to raise a lot of money for these projects,
Yeah.
you know, it's significant when the line item shows up. If you take Don Wheaton YMCA and you take the line item for bonds, you know, that's a lot of hot dogs
Yeah.
that we get
Yeah,
sold.
absolutely.
And then in the end, Clark never did get called on a bond.
No.
So I mean, where did that money go?
Yeah. Well,
It's
they
insurance.
get, those guys in Toronto still get their check.
They
right?
still get their check. That's right.
Bonding's like insurance. You never need it until you actually need it.
And it's important from a municipality perspective for that kind of safety and support as well. So,
Yeah, but if it can, like on a bond, you got labor, material, and performance.
yeah.
You have 60-day money on any one of the pieces going in.
Yeah.
So you've got at least 60-day money to protect.
Yeah.
So, and if you got payment certifiers that are doing their job, you know.
It shouldn't be an issue.
It should be an issue, right? So. Okay.
But, sorry, but you can't control, I don't know the politically correct way to put it, but companies go out of business and do silly things and they go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
They don't plan on going out of business. I think that's, I mean, last year we lost, and I don't know why, but, you know, we had a fairly strong, a couple of years ago, we had a reasonably strong market. They were still building some schools, and we had 2 steel manufacturers go out of business.
Right. As
Leader in capital, and then
well, he was the biggest.
the Leader was the biggest,
That's
right?
right.
And they geared up years before, and they were over. So we're also protecting for stuff like that, you know, we just don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Right. But the impact to that was to, was to the contractor, wasn't to the sub. It wasn't to the owner.
It wasn't to the owner.
That's right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick point of clarification, if you don't mind. A moment ago, I think you said something about they can be bonded as opposed to would they not have to be bonded? Is it?
It's our requirement.
distinction?
Like you can do a project without bonding.
Right.
Right, but
That would be suicide.
yeah. So we have.
Well, not suicide, but
I
it would
mean,
make a lot of sense.
there on a rare occasion, an owner may request a 10% deposit instead of bonding, as an example. There are other occasions where the owner says, well, I'll save the money and then we'll just be tougher policemen. I mean, it's not out of the question that it's never been done, but I can say that it's never been done in a municipal environment.
Right. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Just back to the construction management side, I've certainly seen the bright side and I've seen the other side.
Oh, us too.
Yeah, so it depends on the people, right, and who's administering. I like your comment about the site superintendent, but again, that's only as good as that day, right? I think you had some challenges at William Lutsky, at Don Wheat with the first site superintendent, right? So, those things.
And it's not to say that we haven't had situations where we've told construction companies that the superintendent has got to go.
Right.
And our worst experiences with construction management has been pure construction management, where it's been a percentage. And I'm trying to think of the year, but in a period of time when there was rampant inflation, if you were in a construction management contract that was just on a percentage, every month there was a 2% increase in everything, and so the prices, there was no fixed price, that price just kept going up.
Right.
And that's why the recommendation is this fixed priced option. At the close of the pre-construction services, we get a fixed price. We've had the guys on board. They're telling us what we're missing, what we're not missing, if they need more information.
And so the trades and suppliers. Yes, it's the general, but it's really the trades and suppliers that build these things. That they all have an opportunity, good or bad, at a shot. Yeah. Either through the Edmonton Construction Association, through the tendering process over there, whatever. Not that the contractor has his list of favorites, and that's the, right? You got to be able to have everybody go out and
we can post this on APC for sub-trades.
Yeah.
And so, all of that is part of it. So we can get a full market. We can do, there can be, I don't know, through the town, we can have information sessions or for local sub-trades, if that's necessary. If that's certainly possible, but ultimately it's their responsibility to compete with the construction world on the project. And as I mentioned before, it's an open book process. So there will be at some point, the general contractor will walk, the construction manager will walk in with a pile of paper. We've got 33 divisions now. And so plus or minus, there will be 33 different divisions of sub-trades that we will go through as to either there's 3 bidders. Sometimes, sometimes you get 5, sometimes you get 2. But hopefully, we've worked with the construction manager, and he understands priorities for us, and at least get prices from the local sub-trades and so forth.
Right. And then along with that is the constructability piece that you talked about, and with Mr. Carey, Lafarge had spoken to them about the Insulpor package that they now have. Right. And that I'm hoping that we would at least give that a shot as an option through this process.
I mean, I think we obviously have to review the constructability and those requirements, but we're open to all of those things at this point if it's a simple exchange.
Yes.
And it's an easy process. And is there an ability to save money, and what's the detailing change? Are we doing it, or is it through a shop drawing process, which is very likely? and what do we end up with when it's all said and done? What's the warranty? So, yeah, all of that's evaluated.
Right, so with Lafarge, typically they do their own engineering.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
so that no grid lines change.
No.
And really even right down to the bleacher package.
Yeah.
You know, that they did at Rogers, which
Yeah.
is all precast.
Yeah.
Makes for an interesting, option.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anything, I mean, I think we have to make sure that it's an appropriate system for this type of building.
Right.
And if it's good enough for Rogers, it's,
Yeah, so that's right. So it was that and Instacore, and of course we talked about some hollow core, we talked about double Ts. So
Yeah.
I like to just make sure that we're talking options here.
I think it's a little conversation.
Having said that, options are nice and you can do it. I would hesitate to get so far in that we're redesigning this building as we go through tendering. And I have seen that happen.
Yeah.
So,
That's not been what I just stated.
Yeah.
This is simply an option to take exactly what's there and use a different product.
yeah, and you do that for one scope, then you do it for another scope, then you do that for another scope, you do that for another scope, and the next thing you know, we have something that doesn't look like what we asked for in the first place.
Okay, so that's
Just
not.
saying, be cautious, that's all.
Yeah, well, I'm using experience, and my experience tells me that this package would be the right package as an option for this building.
I'm not saying.
Okay, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, it's my first time being exposed to a project of this nature and magnitude, so just to clarify in my mind, maybe people are listening on Facebook, just to maybe have it clear, but with the construction management option to convert to fixed fee arrangement, my understanding is from our discussion here that during the pre-construction activities phase, the general contractor and they may say, it's not $29,500,000, it's going to be $30 million. And we decide at that point, yes, we agree to that, and we lock in our price at 30. Conversely, they may say, nope, it's going to be 29 million even, not 29.5. We lock it at 29 million, and we're locked in at 29. That's a correct assessment of how this process will happen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But if we don't agree with 30,
Correct.
then we work
Sorry.
with the construction manager to ask him what are some options without changing the design significantly, without deleting great big scopes of work. What are our options to potentially save money? And they may say, this is, a drywall with abuse-resistant drywall and steel studs. We may not choose that option, but we at least have the ability to talk about it.
So on this methodology, then at the 11-week point, based on our schedule,
Yes.
we would lock in our price.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this the point in the conversation where we can talk about quality checks and quality?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, being new to a project of this magnitude and scope, where does that fit in? How does that fit in? Who's in charge of that? Where I don't want to be is I don't want to be a third of the way in, half of the way in, 3/4 of the way in, and then done, and then hear anecdotal stories of cost cutting or of people sitting on the road watching people cut corners and trades, and there's going to be a lot of eyes on the project. And
Sure.
People have quality top of mind. We've had quality issues with facilities in town in the past, and we owe it to residents to make sure that those checks are there. Can you maybe speak to that a bit?
Well, I think checks start with our evaluation. It starts with the evaluation of the contractors, the type of work they've done, and eventually the subtrades that we select. So that's the first kick at the can. We also provide bi-weekly construction reviews on site every 2 weeks. That I'm sure there's a building committee that someone's going to get nominated to come to the job site, but basically it's a review of construction issues, schedule, quality control, and any other item that may come up. Our engineers are on site. They at key components of the build, when the rebar's installed, before the concrete's poured. We also retain, or the town would retain, inspection agencies. So we typically do for our subsoil to make sure our compaction's up. We do 28-day concrete tests to make sure our concrete is coming up to strength. And obviously that is a quality control test. There is a structural steel inspection. A company called Qualimed is typically retained to do that, to make sure that, you know, we've got our certificates from our installers and our welders and all of that stuff. We'll do all of the building envelope inspections prior to insulation install, vapor barriers, make sure we've got our overlaps and all of that stuff. And then then there'll be a roof inspector, which will probably be the last third-party inspector. I don't believe we need a painting inspector. That one's kind of overkill, but we're here every 2 weeks. And if we have to be here every week at the end of the project, that's kind of the standard approach to our quality control and management of construction. There is always somebody that's going to walk by and doesn't like the way somebody does something, and I'm sure everybody will hear about it, and then we'll address it at that moment.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I think a few others have mentioned their lack of experience in this type of thing, and I would definitely fit that bill. So I've got quite a few questions, but I guess the first one I want to speak to is the involvement of council, what our role, and maybe this is Mr. Hiltz's opportunity to speak, but what is the role of council in all of this? So we went through the timeline, we talked about, you know, obviously at some point, whether it's June 26th or later, we need to, you know, make a decision, but then there was a reference to potential interviews, and are we looking at this evaluation sheet? Could you give an overview of what is our role going to be up until the start of construction?
So council's role, first and foremost, will be to approve the budget. We'll then start the process of the borrowing bylaw, which will be approved by council. As far as approving construction managers or selections on RFPs or quality control or anything else to do with construction, that's not council's role. There's no governance in that. Once you have the budget, you hold us accountable to make sure we meet all those quality standards. We'll report on progress as we move along, and if there's any information that council wants, we'll gladly share.
Okay, and so that's what I was hoping the answer would be, because I don't think I'm definitely not qualified to look at it. So I just wanted to make sure that, but I wanted to get kind of people with experience in that. Is that are we comfortable is that typical practice? I mean, I shouldn't say typical practice, but is that something we're comfortable with, where essentially we make a decision and, okay, yeah, we're approving 29.5, and then it sounds like it's out of our hands from there.
Right.
Correct.
So if I can, and to go back to Mr. Hiltz, so CCBCC, and we thought we had that pinned down a few times, and I know we had people before council here looking for more and more money as a result of the process, and to your point, this is different. This process will change.
Yeah, and also, your Chair, is the difference with the CCBCC is the town did not project manage that project. It was done by a volunteer organization, and they really did not, you know, through that process, would not take advice from that perspective. So that was a parallel process that we really did not have any control over.
Right.
So it was a very difficult process, and so this one we are accountable. And if we get to that point and it's $30 million at the start of the project, we'll come back to council and say, we've looked at every option. It's $30 million. Do you want to go 30 million, or what are we cutting to get it down to 29.5? That's the role of council, is keeping us accountable, and if we need to come back, we'll come back. And as what CEO Schwartz had indicated, is that we'll come back with those updates, you know, quarterly updates and things like that. Like, we're breaking ground, we're going to have a big celebration in the community. That'll be a great event to have that ribbon cutting. Then, you know, once we get to a certain point, we might have something else that will be happening and stuff. But if you hire good people, you get good results, and that's been my experience. And you know, we don't necessarily, through our procurement procedures and stuff like that, we don't have to prescribe to hiring the cheapest person. We have to hire the best person for the job. Right. And you know, we have to be able to make it work with that budget we're given.
And again, just through some experience in this community, whenever the final contract is written, that it does get our solicitor's eyes and review.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Because it has not happened in the past.
Yeah, no.
As we found out, unfortunately, later. Right? So just want to make sure that whole process is in place.
Ms. Watts.
Yeah.
John.
But ultimately, once we've said go build, we're sort of in information receive mode at that point.
Yeah, no, it's a good clarification. I needed it. Like I said, I hope that's where it was going.
Yeah, no, and quite frankly, that's where we want to be, because we have other things and issues than rather to try and micromanage a project.
Perfect. I got a couple of questions about the timing, but it sounds like I read through the slides before, so maybe you want to get...
Well, we can do that. I mean, I've actually been through all of the details on every, so I can go through them quickly if you wish.
Well, let's just keep going with questions.
Yeah. I think we can just keep going with questions. I've been through most of that information, and I'll answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay, so Sam, sorry, curious.
Yeah, so a two-part question. One, when you talked, when we sent the package out and we got those costs and came back both around 29.5, did we have a timeline in terms of when that construction would start? And I guess the question is including that 29.5, is that some potential heating if we're having to do that during the winter months and all that sort of stuff?
So again, I mean, we're going to have to go through a winter, one way or another, right? And two, I mean, the heating and hoarding costs obviously can get out of hand if it's not estimated properly. And I mean, we use Environment Canada as the gauge, and there's no excuse if you vary from that and you try and, you know, decide, we got more rain than we were supposed to. I don't, but, you know. Yeah. But the reality of it is relative to schedule, the way we see it, if approval happens, we get foundations, get started in October. It's not a problem. Into November, we can tarp foundations if we need to. If it's grade beams, piles are not an issue. You're going down 7 meters, pouring concrete. I mean, frost doesn't get to 5 feet till March, right?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but your expertise and your level is way up here. So could you just maybe explain if the decision? So we've got a 12-week window. If the decision is provided on the 26th and as a green light, and you go through your 12-week period, could you explain what is required or what is necessary to quote unquote get all the concrete? What is necessary to get done before we start getting into the winter months? Like, could you just maybe explain that first piece? I don't know if I'm asking the question right, but from what people are asking and saying that, you know, that's the heating and hoarding, that's where those costs can potentially go out. And the reason why we're asking this question is we're bringing this up, we're bringing the timeline forward to make the decision at a potential expense of losing some political negotiation ability. If it doesn't help, or if there is some potential, if there's no real benefits and savings, taking aside construction costs, then there may not be a point in doing it right away. So that's kind of the thinking. If we can get it done and it benefits the project to get in the ground October 1st, then that makes our decision a lot easier. But if it doesn't really matter, you know, aside from losing 6 months in the schedule, then, you know, we could potentially use that from a negotiation perspective. So could you just maybe walk through what's required in order to be able to get in the ground and get what's required done before the freeze hits?
Right. So there's a couple of things. With this construction management process, really all you, as was mentioned, you approve to proceed with the construction management process, and we retain a construction manager. With the construction manager on board, we flat out ask him, when do you want to start? That's the first question you can ask. You can say, irrespective of what my opinion is, you can ask the construction manager, is it better to wait until May or April? I mean, in April, there's frost 5 feet in the ground, maybe more if that area has been driven on, as an example, because as you drive on frost, it drives it deeper. So the reality of it is that if they're waiting until the frost is out of the ground, it's likely in May. If they feel that they can start sooner, our 12 weeks brings us to October, in and around there. There's no frost typically in the ground. We've got a pile and grade beam system, so we're drilling piles down 7 meters, and we've got a 2-foot strip of concrete on the surface. It's really easy to tarp. There's additives for winter concrete and things like that. It doesn't, if it's protected properly, the construction people can attest that, we're in Canada, we pour concrete. I'm not a great fan of pouring exposed concrete in January, but, October, November, it's a good place to start. At that point, there's still no heat and hoarding required other than just to maybe keep your foundations warm. Now you need to stand steel. So you're standing steel or whatever system we end up with. And there's no heat required. I mean, the steel guys are tough guys. They're out there, they're standing steel through the winter, the coldest parts of those months. And then, so the concrete slabs aren't poured at all in that period of time. It's grade beam structure. As we start getting into probably February, March, when it's starting to warm up a little bit, we're starting to put the exterior cladding on. We still haven't heated any part of the building yet. So the benefit of starting earlier is we may actually not have a huge heating and hoard load because our cladding's all done. Our roof's all done when next winter shows up. So depending upon the contractor and his ability to phase how this works, my guess is he gets the foundations done, the grade beams done. He gets some perimeter walls started to get some sense of enclosure. And then early in the year, get the site organized and asphalted when the plant's open so they're not working in a wet space. And then they're starting to move inside early summer. And you may not need a ton of heat and hoard with that process. If we wait, for instance, till May, October, we might have the cladding on. They may have to put some heat in to start drywall and all of that stuff. So I typically a fall, late summer, early fall start actually can be advantageous. And I mean, there's people who are in construction, and I don't think they have an opinion and they've seen it, but that's where we feel the advantage comes from.
Oh, it's very helpful. Thank you.
Right. So, and if you take that same construction manager, take the same project, and come back with different theory on how to approach it, which is a screw pile, and I'll use the word Instacore again.
Right.
And a grade beam that's embedded within the Instacore panel. It's already built, dropped onto site, so then you don't have any of those techniques on site.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have the advantage. So there's a good construction manager is going to give you options, and he's going to look at all the various variables and see which way.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've got some insulated panels in here too. So that's another system that it just gets delivered, hooked up, and you're enclosed fairly quickly. So
okay, I got to go to Bill next. Start, Bill.
Oh no, I'll wait.
I'll keep
monopolizing a bit.
I was going to say and so the advantage of the late fall start is really good. Where we run into problems, and this is once again based on the selection of the construction manager, is if we start to push into December or January and we haven't put a footing in the ground or a screw pile or anything. We start to lose your advantage, and you're better off now waiting until spring. For me, if we can get going fast enough, and anything we can do to shave off the 12 weeks, so.
And one option is to combine the RFI with the RF.
The EOI and the
You might be able to do that, and just because we've done it where there's both experience and fee at the bottom.
Right.
Can you just throw some construction manager names out, typical ones that would potentially bid on this sort of stuff, just so I can wrap these?
So it would be, funnily enough, we haven't seen PCL on anything lately. Cormode Dixon, the people with experience would be Clark Builders, would be Graham, it would be Gen Call. They've been submitting on our RFPs. Crawford Construction, PCL might.
Keller,
Shandos will, and you start to get to that 8-10 number.
Yeah, okay.
Fairly quickly.
Okay, Schultz?
Yeah, Thank you, Chairman. It's just, I just wanted to remind council that that is not a preference list.
No,
It's
no,
just
for sure.
basically an opinion of
Yeah,
some
no,
contractors. When some, in public, we can get ourselves into
'cause
hot
we're
water
being
when we publicly say who you could or who might be a good job or whatever like that. So those just to remind council that these are just as a example of, it's not a preference.
That's why I frame my question as who would typically bid on this type of thing, not who are we looking at. So, thank you.
Steve?
So along the way, thanks for answering the question, Councillor Monkoff-Swain, because that's kind of where I want to be, is if we're hurrying or pushing along or trying to achieve a target, let's be doing it for the right reasons, and that sure sounds like the right reasons. So thanks for that. So along the way, my question is around effective construction on the community. So we have a facility and we're building it and we're going, and all of a sudden there's construction noise, there's a messy site, we're dealing with cleanliness, we're dealing with a wet site, as you said, and stuff's tracking out onto the roads and these types of things. So obviously there's mitigative measures in place for that. This isn't your guys' first rodeo on this. Maybe just if you could speak to some of the measures you have to minimize some of the common issues you would see around construction in an active community.
First of all, it's communication is the key, number one key. So we need to, when we look at our site superintendent, he has to be aware of the community and the impact of a muddy site. A lot of these guys will have skid steers with brushes on them to make sure that parking lot's clean. And you know, we can't always avoid the mess, but obviously mitigation is a part of it. We are going to run this job not as a sustainable site, so we will manage runoff off a site as a course of action. We are going to manage waste. We want recyclables recycled. We want to be able to walk away from this with a level of stewardship that hasn't cost us any money. We're not getting a brass plaque necessarily, but the things that we can do to make this a sustainable process, that's what we do on every job. So, you know, I think the communication part is really important. We do have bi-weekly meetings. The contractors, I mean, we're on the phone with the project managers probably every other day. If there's an issue, we hear of an issue, we ask them to rectify it. And it's one of those things that we build into the documents up front. We build into our conversations with the construction manager up front. We talk about hotspots. What are the things that drive people crazy? It's a lot of things in communities, but you know, we are working on a site that's still being used on a portion of it. There's safety, there's control. We need to keep the kids out. We need to keep, you know, everybody wants to have a peek in and see what's going on. So, you know, we do have to manage that very closely, and it's bi-weekly and even daily if necessary.
Okay. Bill, were you going to go?
Yes, you don't
Okay,
mind.
sorry.
If you're done.
Bill, you're up.
You're done? Thank you. I appreciate you coming and answering all our questions, especially from us younger guys not understanding how this process works. But a quick thing, if you don't mind. I know we're not building a house, for example, though, but if I build a house, I would be able to pick out the carpet, the tile, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We've seen a $29 million project. I have no idea the quality of glass we're using, the tile we're using, this sort of thing. There's been some construction issues in the past where we have not built a proper building. For $29 million, can you give us some assurance from, my bigger question is, that this council will build an Aquafit 2 expansion where we're doing it, we're going to build it properly, the budget allows for the proper amount of labor to be used, so we're not cutting corners, we're not going to be sitting here 10 years from now saying, well, the north wall of the field house is falling apart now, we got to fix that. Part of the money in this project is going to fix the Aquafit existing building, not mechanically moving it around, actually filling part of the building.
Yeah.
It's only 10 years old.
Yeah.
I don't want to be sitting here in 10 years, future council saying, well, this council 10 years ago didn't build a proper building.
Right.
So will $29 million give us a proper 25 or 30-year building with proper materials being used, assuming it's installed properly, of course, but we're not chintzy on the materials, we're not chintzy on the process, where enough money is in the pot here to do a good construction job that we're going to be proud of, and not sit 20 years now saying, those guys built a lousy building 15, 20 years ago. Do you know what I'm getting at with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm being a little blunt, and I appreciate being a little too blunt.
I mean, our approach is traditionally, we build 25 to 40-year buildings. That's what we're municipal architects. The $29.5 million is the cost of building that type of building. The reason why I'm not going to comment on whatever's happened before, but we're in a position now where we feel we need to make some adjustments to some existing constructability issues, and we feel it's necessary to do that to give you the building that the municipality deserves. Now, as far as colors and materials and so forth, no, you get that. I don't know if they get the opportunity,
we don't get that opportunity.
but that will happen. There will be somewhere a display that talks about what finishes we're having on the floor, what finishes, the paint. We'll talk about the substrate, because the paint will go on either concrete block. We're aware of the requirement for durability in public buildings, and our little stuff behind closed doors. Our little angels, when they get behind closed doors, aren't always little angels. And so that's the direction that we've been, Kerry's been, and administration's given us, and that's where we've gone. This building could be built. I'm sure there's somebody out there would claim that they could do it for $20 million.
Right. That's what I'm getting at, is exactly that.
And to that point, though, in this particular case, you get to be judge and jury, right?
That's
in the
correct.
whole process.
In the whole process.
We've had where you've had your hands tied
Yeah.
in this community. In this particular case, you've got the full say, right?
Yeah.
And we're not connecting ourselves to a construction manager as a result.
No.
You're in charge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is that, just quickly, one last comment quickly, sorry, that I want to have a comfort zone, and I believe I have that now, between Kerry's answer yesterday and your answer today. I'm feeling much more comfortable that a year or two down the road, as we're constructing this, people are saying, $29 million, you couldn't do it for 27? No, $29 million, 5 is the right number.
Yeah.
Gives a quality building, a 25 to 40-year building with quality materials, quality workmanship. We didn't cut any corners here. We didn't get extravagant. We didn't cut corners. And I want to have the comfort zone that we as a council are making the right decision, that we are building a bona fide 20, 30-year building.
So
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so
Thank you for your answer.
We're not showing up one day with a set of drawings, here you go. I mean, I'm not sure, but I believe there's been several opportunities to pour over the documents. We typically do it 30, 60, 75, 95. In today's world, these things go on to the server world, and everybody's had full access to our documents. So there has been technical reviews by administration, and they have poured over the documents, and we're moving this forward as a team. But you're absolutely right, it's on us. But the team has had an opportunity to review it, and the next thing is, our next step is the constructability review with the construction manager, so they understand that this is the level of quality that we're moving forward with.
Thank you very much.
Still have supplemental?
Yeah, just going back to just following up Steve and impact on the community, and it's going to come, this is going to come out during the constructability review, and so council should keep it in the back of their minds that part of this project is a substantial renovation to the existing building, and we may not be able to keep that building, or it may not be preferable to keep that existing building open. We may need to look at shutting it down for a certain period of time during construction to make the construction guys easier and cheaper, rather than trying to keep it going piecemeal. So I don't want to get into that debate tonight, but during constructability and reviews as we go through pre-construction, that one's coming up.
Okay, Steve?
Question for maybe administration and BR2. You brought up one of the C words, that's one of my favorite things, which is communication. So typically, what does communication look like? You've spoken internal in the construction and administration, but what does communication look like to the residents at certain key points along the way? What would we look to do as as administration with support from DR2 along the way at key milestones. And how would we communicate that? It's okay if we haven't dug that deep yet, but I really want to make sure that we're providing updates along the way and being as proactive, sharing with what we're doing and some whys along the way. Just some comments there, please.
Thank you. So that would involve like a communication plan with a schedule of events throughout the process. So for example, it'd kind of start with the announcement of the go ahead of the project, and then you may have it where your ribbon cutting event, and then basically where people can go and find information on the project. So it could be taking people to the website. It may be that there might be a display at the Ackfoot Centre or Town Hall that shows these are the floor tiles and the carpet and the locker panel kind of thing, colorations of the facility and stuff, like make them part of that process. And then during some of those key milestones throughout the process too, you may have those celebration points. And then plus there's going to be those times that we're going to be getting into that that are going to be those sticky parts, like your worship brought up about the Ackfoot Centre. We're planning to maintain an open Ackfoot Centre during the construction process. Or we'll have to be shut down for a period of time because they're going to be moving mechanical. But there may become a time that it can stay open, or we may have to come to you guys with a decision. That would have to be very well communicated out, and it would have to be before it, just like not till it's that day that it happens. So we're on top of those things, and those are things that we're talking internally and with BR2 through their communication process as well.
Okay, just a quick follow-up.
Yep.
So the word Rogers came up earlier. Obviously, their project is here, ours is here, but there's a lot of key communication things that I saw along the way there. When you look at site tours, when you look at, throw a drone up once a week to show construction progress, get some time-lapse stuff, imagery going wrong. There's an ability to throw stuff up on the website away. I think our imagination is probably the only limitation here, but people want to know. People want to know what their money's being spent on. People want to know their money's being spent well. They want a clean site and they want to know what's going on, right? So, that's just my comments on it, and I appreciate what you've thrown out there. That's good.
Just to add to that, we have had projects where, there's been cameras that have documented the process of construction. There are companies that do that. They're not inexpensive, but the general contractor will take tens of thousands of photographs of this project process. We request them for key types of milestones, whether we're there, whether we're inspecting it. The contractor will do a bi-weekly report and typically attach a dozen or 2 dozen photos to the back of their weekly. So there's lots of opportunities to tie that in, and we can ask that information be made available to us. We can have that conversation with the construction manager prior to the start of construction and actually put a plan together in conjunction with the construction manager.
Thank you. Schultz?
Well, I just wanted to prepare council for the inevitable, is that everyone's going to be very excited. We have a ribbon cutting and everyone's just going to be just stoked about it starting. Then for 6 months, they're going to be driving by the site, they're going to say, nothing's happening, no one's doing anything, and then all of a sudden it'll be April, it'll be boom. And you just have to be prepared for that 6 months. A lot is happening, but it just will not seem like anything is happening. So you just have to be prepared for that, that's a reality of
It could kind of be like
construction.
Domino's pizza though, right? You order your pizza and then it walks you through on the bottom.
Well,
Sam's putting your toppings on, Frank's getting it out of the oven, and Mike's delivering it to your house, right? Like, there is, it sounds funny, I'm making a joke out of it, but there's no reason we couldn't have a construction timeline, and we have our gas meter, and we say, full is when we're walking in and sitting in the hot tub, right? And, it's just, like you said, the imagination, we need to communicate, so.
Okay. Sorry, and Sam, you had?
Yeah, I got 2 specific design questions. One's design, one's timeline. The first one is around mobility issues. And so a resident reached out and explained that the current Ackfoot is kind of hard to access. So what have we done as part of the design to take into account the mobility or access design issues?
I would suggest that we don't have any stairs. We will have 0 upgrade access to the facility. If there are upper levels,
I can speak to that.
maybe Terry, because I'm,
Sure.
I'm at my level of, I didn't do the detailed design, so other than pulling pieces together for.
So that was a very important part of our discussions. And so we can say that it will be full mobility access for people in wheelchairs. We also put in a much more substantive elevator in the facility to make sure that people in wheelchairs, et cetera, walkers and things like that can access the second floor. So those were all part of that initial discussions that we're having during the design process. Because originally we were keeping the original elevator and it was not meeting some of the specifications. So we have made those changes and stuff to make sure we will be and will meet those needs of our community members.
Okay, have we, I don't know how to, is there a way to reach out? So the town certainly looked at it, I get it, and working with the designer, but I mean, is there being consultation with some of those? Could you explain to some of the people that?
So basically, for one of the people that we talked about at all of our facilities, including this one, was what's his name? The elderly fellow in the wheelchair.
You don't need to say his name?
Mark Pickup.
Mark Pickup?
Yes, Pickup. Yeah, so he's been involved in an audit of all our facilities, and we did discuss this with him. One of our former counselor's brother was someone that, those were discussions that took place as well.
Thank you.
Now, did we have everyone come to a group meeting? No, but we did reach out through that whole process.
Thank you. And the second specific question I had was regarding the dog park, and I'm not going to get into specifics in this meeting, I'll bring it up in the next meeting, but just around the timeline of when we think that we will need to take the dog park out to get the car park going and everything else like that. Is there a way that we're planning on staging it so we keep the north portion open for as long as possible? Just what's the plan around the timing to?
I think the discussion of phasing will happen with the construction manager.
Okay.
A fall start will probably mean that they are not going to deal with a parking lot until the spring. Right?
Spring 2019.
So they will, contractor will require a certain amount of area for laydown and for deliveries and all of that stuff. But, I mean, it's an obvious conversation that we need to have with a construction manager. Access, safety, how much area is left over, and how that works. And we will have that conversation. And that may be, in May, that's when that happens. And then alternate plans have to happen because the batch plants don't open until the middle of May and you don't get asphalt anyway. So.
Okay, John.
We're starting to get into the weeds of actually constructing it, and we haven't even made a decision on if we're going to do it. So just to bring us back to the point of this meeting, it basically was to get a timeline and to get some assurance around whether or not we can, like on the 26th, go on the 27th, stuff goes out.
Yep, according to that schedule, absolutely.
Right, and then we can start to get into the admin can start to get into the details and start bringing some of this stuff back.
Okay. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, respect for where you're going with that. I do think this is an opportunity with the architect sitting here to ask some pointed questions, so I'm going to continue. Parking at the facility, if you could speak to that a little bit. There's been a bunch of folks who have brought up concerns around the parking and is there enough, and I think we asked the same question of Jim, and he said yes there is, but maybe if you wouldn't mind just explaining that for a second.
I mean, there are requirements and, when we build buildings, they tell us exactly the minimum number of parking spots that are required for a type of building. We base it on occupancy, and we base it on the Alberta Building Code. The Alberta Building Code stipulates pretty clearly, and the combination of the municipal code, because that's driven by the community, right? You determine how big a stall is, whether it's big enough for a one-ton dually or it's, the mini. But the reality of it is the combination of those two documents tell us exactly how many parking stalls we need to have. Now, we rely upon the municipality's experience that those requirements are the right requirements for these types of facilities. That's what we base it on. I can actually, maybe Carrie can speak to the fact whether we meet or exceed those requirements, but we would at a bare minimum meet the specific land use bylaw requirements for this facility. I don't believe there's been a request for a relaxation of any of those.
So what's basically through our land use bylaws that for a facility like this, that it probably required something like 550 or 575 stalls. We're at 475. So we are a bit lower. However, we are significantly higher than any of the other communities would require for the same building. So for example, St. Albert has a requirement of 275 stalls for this type of building. Up to the City of Edmonton, I think it requires 400 or 450. We went through that exercise and we looked at a number of different communities. So we don't quite meet our land use bylaw, but we were very comfortable with this. And we also have to remember that for one event every 2 years, where you'll max up the parking. Like 475 stalls, you have to remember up to Ken Nickel, there's 143 stalls. So there's a significant number there.
Right, and part of that discussion was, of course, we were reviewing our parking bylaw, and part of it too was just the sheer numbers. You've got an occupant load, you've got that many cars. Yeah. Everybody would have to bring 2 cars to fulfill the occupant load. Yeah. Plus, we had offered to get Blunt and Associates in here to do a study.
And they did.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So because you don't use the place like a Rogers event, and people are coming and going all the time, right? So you're never at the occupant load, let alone the parking load. So.
And in a facility like this, there's also a little bit of crossover. So one family comes and there might be one of the kids is playing hockey and the other 2 are playing basketball. So it's kind of crossover. And when we calculate the parking, we're looking at these facilities individually. So there's a little bit of overlap, and I think that was the evaluation that was.
When Scott Wheaton was still the president of the Beaumont Amateur Hockey Association, he made the case, and it sort of got out of hand in terms of the name, call it a practice facility, and that seemed to get a life of its own. But it was mainly to say that they're going to use a lot of that ice for ice practice. Yeah. So then, what do the parents do? They drop them off and they go. It's not a game. You're not parked there. You're not sitting there for 2.5 or 3 hours. So that was part of the discussion at that time. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we at a wrap up at this point? I think so. Unless there's anything further. I think so. Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
No problem.
Say hello to.
I will.
That
crazy burger's up trying to get to Tuktoyaktuk on a motorcycle right now.
Yeah, well.
I don't have that same desire, so.
Really? Let's hope there's more than a goat trail to get them there.
Well, they put a new road in, I guess, to Tuk, and they close it it closes every once in a while. And they've tried 3 times. I don't know why they keep trying, but hopefully.
That's architecture.
Yes.
You never give up.
Stop. That's right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It was very helpful.
Sam?
Could I just make a recommendation that there's a lot of information received today that clearly the public is going to be asking. I understand next week is more around the discussion in terms of the financing options, but it would be great if administration could compile a package, a couple of pages with some key points on going through the timeline at a very high level, just that can be referenced. Like the information here, while I was able to read it and kind of get understanding without asking specific questions, it didn't click for me. So is there a way that administration can put some sort of communication together that is going to go with it? Because it's not just a finance piece on the 26th. So I'd like to be able to see some sort of communication, 1 or 2 pager that can kind of highlight the timeline and the constructability aspects to that. Is that a fair request?
I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. Is it a simple matter of taking some of these timelines that we presented tonight and include it as an attachment and refer to it in the report?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see a reason why we can't do that.
My job to communicate it, but I'd prefer if it was, and I trust you and Mr. Hiltz to combine it versus my chicken scratch here to try and summarize what we heard here, right? So if that would be included with that,
we can do that.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, just quick clarification. For my mind, the 26th is strictly a financial piece. There's not we're not going to have this whole conversation again on the 26th.
No, but every resident is they're asking several questions about parking, about dog park, about, how long does it take to get started, right? So
I agree.
So
but that's not those are constructability questions that we can answer over the month of July as we work through the construction process and the pre-construction phases. To be focused on the 26th is, are we going to build it and how are we going to pay for it? The rest of that is superfluous.
So I would
extraneous.
So I would disagree. Part of the reason we talked about here, part of the reason why we're potentially looking at moving up is because the timeline fits, right? So that helps, right? And that makes a difference in terms of the cost of the project. And we talk about the increased cost of construction, all that sort of stuff. So to hear his answer, or to summarize Mr. Bushnell's answer about, it's advantageous to get in the fall, that helps from a financial perspective, right? So that's where I'm going with it. I'm not looking for an answer on, summarize exactly when we're getting into the dog park, and we're not going to worry about that. It was just the overall timeline perspective is important for me to make my decision.
And that's why we're having the discussion tonight.
Exactly.
We don't need to have the discussion twice.
Yeah, I agree, but so hence the request for background information that we can communicate to residents, and it's going to be easier for us, for me to have my conversations when people are asking about what does it mean, how long is it going to take, is it worth it, blah, 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 from a constructability perspective. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, again, just to clarify then, is what we will provide is that the timeline slide that he just discussed with some explanation that it may not start in October. If it does start in October, here's some likely the constructability conversation, which will have to happen later, because we don't know to determine that. One of the things Steve said is the construction manager may turn around and say, you know what, it does not make sense to start in October. So I hope we're not communicating to everybody that we're going to start in October. We're trying to, and that should come out in the discussion, I would think, at table, that there are some advantages, but regardless, we've got, here is the timeline. Whether it starts in October or it starts in May. I think we can do that. I just don't want to jump the gun on your decision.
Okay, so we've taken the meeting to this point. There was an ask for you to go in camera.
I'll make that motion.
So make that motion. All in favor?
Did you want to eat first before you go in camera?
Is it a lengthy issue?
It shouldn't be. It's a 10-minute, it's a 2-minute update from Gary and Bill.
Okay.